Tonight, we pull back the veil on an era shrouded in the glow of the sun and the constant murmur of the river. A time marked by reverence for the gods who shaped the harvests, a justice administered by scribes and governors in the pharaoh's name, and a simple diet based on the gifts of the land. Together, we will delve into the true, everyday essence of life during the reign of Tutankhamun. For a moment, dismiss the idealized images of colossal temples soaring towards the sky and pharaohs adorned with dazzling gold. The raw reality, without the shield of power and wealth, was that mere daily subsistence represented a constant effort, a testament to the people's labor against the relentless rhythms of nature. So, before you curl up under your blankets, I invite you to take a moment to give me a like and join this community by subscribing, but only if you truly find value and enjoy the narratives I share here. Congratulations! Your eyes slowly open in a year of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun's reign, in the year 1330 B.C. Allow yourself a moment to adjust to the dim light of your humble dwelling. Last night was undoubtedly marked by work. Forget about raised beds and soft cushions. Your resting place, most likely, consisted of a mat woven from papyrus or palm fibers, spread out on the packed earth floor, perhaps shared with the body heat of the rest of your family to combat the cool of the desert night. The symphony of wakefulness was a familiar one. The soft snores of your loved ones echoed in the small space, mingling with the occasional cries of jackals in the distance and the barking of the village's guard dogs. The air, warm and earthy, carried a mixture of everyday aromas, from the smell of dry mud to that of nearby farm animals, and perhaps the emanations from simple pits dug in the ground for latrines. The occasional bites from mosquitoes and other insects were a minor nuisance, an unavoidable part of life by the Nile. And in the deep darkness, where the imagination finds its solace, the mind could wander to the tangible worries of the day ahead. The water level of the Nile, the health of the crops, the payment of taxes to the local scribe, and the ancestral stories that wove the creation of the world and the journey to the afterlife. A truly deep and restorative sleep was a necessity, often interrupted by the heat seeping through the adobe walls, the physical discomforts inherent to the mat, and the omnipresent dependence on the cycles of the sun and the river. Interestingly, on some occasions, simple linen mosquito nets were used for protection from insects during the night, a small respite in the daily routine. Your eyelids fight against the feeling of having slept too little as the sound of a horn, distant but familiar, announces the start of the day. It is your village's version of dawn, marking the beginning of labor before the sun reaches its zenith. Your home is a simple adobe house, with a flat mud roof, and perhaps some mats hung as rudimentary partitions, where your family shares the main space, using baskets and reed shelves to store their few belongings. The smell, oh, it is an earthy and everyday mix, a subtle combination of smoke from the morning cooking fire, the scent of sweat from the previous day's tasks, the unmistakable odor of nearby farm animals, and the coolness of damp mud. Elaborate perfumes are an unknown luxury, and even if they existed, their delicate essence would mingle with the fine dust that settles on every surface. You try to stretch your sleepy limbs, but a slight ache in your back reminds you of the hours spent bent over in the fields. At 20 years old, by the count of your time, you are already considered a working adult. Your body feels the strain of manual tasks, and your muscles ache with movement. The simple act of getting up to start the day is a routine. The dirt floor is dry and hard, roughly swept at the end of the previous day. Or perhaps it is covered by a thin layer of sand brought in by the morning breeze. Either way, the bare skin of your feet feels the familiar texture of your home. What daily scene greets you in this dawn under the reign of Tutankhamun? A short distance away, the rest of your immediate family, and perhaps some relative who is temporarily living with you, begin to wake with soft stretches and morning murmurs. Forget the privacy of a single room or a defined personal space. Here, existence is inherently familial, shared down to the last portion of the day. Your day dawns in this ancient Egypt where intimacy is a different concept, as closeness is a natural part of community life, where mutual aid is essential. And so, immersed in this familiarity of presences and the sounds of waking, your day begins. Believe me, considering the simple life and constant companionship, the prospect of a laborious day takes on a very concrete meaning. Curiously enough, in some houses, smaller mats were used for children to sleep near their parents, offering security and warmth during the cool desert nights. So, with the effort of waking and the familiarity of a body accustomed to work, you manage to get up from your mat. Congratulations on receiving a new day. Now, a natural need makes itself known, and it is not a polite invitation, but an urgency that requires immediate attention. It is in these moments that you might recall travelers' stories about the elaborate hygiene systems of other lands. Here you will not find separate rooms for this purpose, nor raised seats, nor soft materials, nor the sound of running water. The simple act of relieving yourself is a simple, though necessary, part of the daily routine. If your life unfolds in a humble village house, your spot will likely consist of a designated area outdoors, perhaps set apart behind some bushes or near the fields, where the earth absorbs what is necessary. The smell will be the natural one of the environment, mixing with the dry earth and vegetation. With the familiarity of habit, you will do what you must, and the earth will take care of it, as it has for generations. Prepare for the natural aromas that await you as you begin your day outside your home. The common areas of the villages and the paths between the fields, far from the grand descriptions of the temples, were likely part of the natural cycle. Imagine the smell of sun-warmed earth, the scent of plants and animals, an earthy and simple mixture. If your luck has granted you a life near a larger settlement, there might be designated areas on the outskirts for these purposes, simple places where the community adapts to basic needs. There you might experience the occasional company of others, but it would not be limited, as in many activities of communal life. It is recommended to be considerate of others and the environment. It is interesting that in some communities of ancient Egypt, there were practices related to personal hygiene and waste disposal, influenced by the proximity to the Nile and the importance of ritual cleanliness in their religion. Although different from modern systems, they sought to maintain a certain order within their means. What a foreign notion that is in this era, under the reign of the young Tutankhamun. Your entire family, from siblings and parents to that distant cousin whose help is welcome in the fields, stirs a short distance from your mats. There are no confines of a personal room, not a simple cloth to offer a visual break from the constant family movement, not even a fleeting moment of solitude to order your morning thoughts before the sun demands your attention. Welcome to waking up in ancient Egypt, a world where community is essential for survival, and where you are rarely ever truly alone, as the family shares living space and daily tasks. And so, with this familiarity of nearby presences, your day begins. Let me assure you that from this point on, your day will be marked by the labors and beliefs that shape your existence. So, with the effort of waking and the awareness of the work that awaits you, you manage to get up from your mat. Congratulations on receiving the light of a new day. Now, the natural need makes itself felt with a simple urgency, and it is not a gentle invitation, but an inherent part of the daily cycle. It is precisely in these moments when you might recall the scribe's stories about the elaborate baths of the nobles. Here you will not find separate structures with raised seats, but there will be designated places for this need, discreet and functional. In ancient Egypt, the simple act of relieving yourself is a natural part of life, carried out with simplicity and consideration for the community. Forget freshly squeezed orange juice or a comforting latte. Here, at dawn, guiding yourself by the sunlight, what often quenches thirst is fresh water from the Nile, stored in clay jars. Yes, water. The reason is clear. The Nile is the source of life, though always with the precaution of letting the sediment settle. Children drink it too. Its taste is that of the river, but it is essential for survival. Do you crave a piece of roasted meat or fresh fish? You can wait for it. These foods are part of the diet, obtained through hunting, fishing, or trade, though they are not a daily luxury for most. The basic diet consists of barley or wheat bread, vegetables grown on the banks of the Nile like onions and cucumbers, and fruits like dates and figs, when the season allows. Spices exist, obtained through trade, but their use is more common among the wealthier classes. Salt is an important commodity, used to preserve food and add flavor. So you chew your bread, drink the Nile water, and prepare for the day's tasks. Breakfast gives you the necessary energy to work under the sun, because the laborious day in the fields or workshops is the basis of your existence. Once you have consumed your simple morning meal, it is time to get dressed. The clothing, functional above all, offers little variety. Your attire consists of one main piece, perhaps a simple linen shenty for men, or a straight linen dress for women, which you have worn for several days, adapting to the tasks and the climate. Forget changing fashions, or the excitement of a new garment. Here, the only consideration is practicality and durability until the fabric wears out from use. Underwear, as we conceive it, is not common. The main linen garment serves that basic function, The tailoring is simple, done by family members or local artisans, aiming for resilience for daily work. Modern washing methods do not exist either. Cleaning clothes is done by taking the garments to the river or a canal, rubbing them with sand or a natural cleaning agent, and then spreading them in the sun to dry. As for footwear, for many, foot protection is minimal or non-existent. Some may own sandals made of woven papyrus or simple leather, which offer basic protection against the hot or stony ground. However, it is common to walk barefoot on the dirt paths, fields, and work areas. This leads to a familiarity with the texture of the ground and a toughness in the skin of the feet. Personal hygiene, though lacking modern advances, is practiced by bathing in the Nile or in canals when possible, using natural oils for the skin. Insects are a part of the environment, especially near the river, but natural methods like oils and smoking are used to mitigate their effects. The skin gets used to the sun and the open air, although occasional irritations are a part of life. Now that you are dressed in your simple clothes and adapted to the conditions, the time has come to go out and participate in the day's labours. The smile, though not constant, is reserved for moments of social and family interaction. Oral hygiene is practiced as much as possible, perhaps by rinsing the mouth with water or rubbing the teeth with a piece of plant fibre. The teeth, over time, show the effects of the diet and the lack of modern care, but the simple diet and lower amount of refined sugars may influence their condition. Occasional aches may be part of life, but remedies are based on traditional knowledge and local herbs. General health is linked to diet, physical work, and the environment. And social life is also marked by the conditions of the environment. Breath, without modern methods of oral hygiene, is a natural aspect of closeness. If family life is important, relationships are based on community and mutual support. Physical closeness is common and accepted. Now that you feel the weariness of the body, let's go outside, because your real labour, the one that sustains your life and that of your community, is just beginning. It's time to work. Your job, if you are like most of the population, is tied to the land or to craftsmanship, contributing to your family's sustenance and the functioning of society. You rise with the light of dawn and work until the sun sets on the horizon. Your tools, a simple hoe, a sickle for the harvest, a loom for weaving, or the tools of your trade, powered by your own strength and skill. The rhythm of work is marked by the seasons and the needs of the community. Days of rest are linked to religious festivals or the necessary breaks to recover from physical exertion. Work is an integral part of life. It is an essential contribution to survival and collective well-being. The fields are cultivated with manual effort or with the help of draft animals, if the family owns them. Crops are irrigated, the fruits of the earth are harvested, animals are cared for, and the necessary tasks for sustenance are performed. The community supports each other in labour and in times of need. If your role in the community is that of a woman, your workday covers childcare, home maintenance, food preparation, making simple clothes, and participating in fieldwork if necessary. Children learn from an early age to help with family chores, integrating into the rhythm of adult life. If your trade is that of an artisan, like a potter, carpenter, or weaver, your day is spent working with the materials of your environment, creating useful objects for the community. Payment is the exchange of goods and services, ensuring daily sustenance. Health is linked to a simple diet, physical work, and resistance to environmental conditions. Rest is necessary to regain strength and continue with the labours. Daily life is a constant interaction with nature and with the members of the community, where work and cooperation are fundamental for survival and the continuity of life. Now that your body feels the fatigue of the day under the sun, let's talk about the climate, that constant factor that governs your lives in ancient Egypt. Because the weather is not just about defined seasons, but about the interaction with the sun, the desert wind, and the floods of the Nile. Let's start with the season of the inundation, Akhet. The Nile overflows, covering the lands with fertile silt. Your adobe house offers a simple shelter, although the humidity can be felt in the air. There are no elaborate heating or cooling systems, only adaptation to natural conditions. The mud walls provide some insulation, and hung mats or cloths can offer some privacy and protection from drafts. Fire is used mainly for cooking and to ward off insects, not so much for heating homes. You wrap yourselves in your linen garments and adapt to the rhythm of the flood, working on tasks that the water level allows. Then comes the season of emergence, Peret, when the waters recede and the land is sown. The sun begins to feel stronger. Your adobe house stays cool during the day and releases the heat slowly at night. There are no fans, but small windows and mats help control the light and air. Sweat is part of working under the sun, but linen clothing allows for perspiration. You cover your head with cloths to protect yourselves from the sun and seek shade during the most intense hours. Insects are more active, especially near the water, and natural oils are used to repel them. Finally comes the season of the drought, Shemu, when the sun is most intense and the rains are scarce. Your adobe house offers a respite from the scorching heat outside. The air can feel dry, and shade is a precious commodity. You dress in light linen and seek coolness near the river or canals. Work in the fields is concentrated in the early morning hours and late afternoon to avoid the midday heat. The desert wind can bring fine sand. Throughout the year, life is tied to the cycles of the Nile and the sun, adapting to natural conditions to ensure survival and sustenance. Do you feel your throat is dry from the day's heat? Do you long for the cool evening breeze? Do you wish you could cool your face with water from the Nile? Water is the source of life, but it also requires respect. The river offers water for drinking and agriculture, but you learn to take it from the cleanest areas and to let the sediments settle. Irrigation canals are also a source, but their quality can vary. Beer, made from barley, is a common drink, especially among workers, since the fermentation process makes it safer than stagnant water. Wine, made from grapes, is a drink more associated with the wealthier classes or special occasions. The key is awareness of the environment and adaptation to the available water sources to ensure hydration and health. And what about personal hygiene? Surely the Nile water is used for cleaning, right? In theory, yes. In practice, the frequency varies. You see, there were various beliefs and practices related to bathing. Immersing oneself in the Nile was common, but not necessarily a daily occurrence for everyone. Cleaning was done using water from the river or canals, pouring it over the body with containers. Soap, as we know it, was not common, but they used oil and natron, a type of natural salt with cleansing properties. Communal baths existed in some areas, but personal hygiene was mainly carried out in homes, near available water sources. Rainwater was also collected and used for various purposes. The Nile was the source of life, but it could also bring diseases if one was not careful with water quality and personal hygiene. Awareness of cleanliness was important, especially in relation to religious practices and rituals. As for health and illness, the explanations and treatments were different from those of modern medicine. Diseases were attributed to various causes, including the will of the gods, imbalances in the body, and environmental factors. The priests of Sekhmet, the goddess of healing, were consulted to treat illnesses, using rituals, prayers, and natural remedies. Lay doctors also existed, basing their treatments on observation and knowledge of the herbs and medical practices of the time. Wounds were cleaned and bandaged with linen. Modern anesthesia for surgeries did not exist, and the understanding of disease transmission was limited. Infections were a serious risk. Remedies based on herbs and minerals were common, passed down through tradition. Health was closely linked to the environment, diet, and lifestyle. After a long day of labor under the sun, feeling the weariness in your body, and the familiarity of the field dust, the time for the meal finally arrives. You return to your simple house with an exhausted body and a stomach announcing its emptiness, waiting for the sustenance that will allow you to rest and regain strength. The meal, though modest, is a vital element in your day. Food preservation is based on traditional methods adapted to the climate, drying fruits and vegetables in the sun, salting fish, storing simple grains, and using clay jars to keep oils and liquids. Your main food is bread, made with wheat or barley, accompanied by the seasonal harvests from your fields or from exchanges at the local market. Vegetables like onions, garlic, cucumbers, and lettuce are common, as are legumes like lentils and fava beans, which are rich in nutrients. Fruits like dates, figs, and melons add sweetness to your diet when available. Meat, whether from poultry, goats, or fish from the Nile, is consumed less frequently, being a valuable protein source, but not a daily one for most. Cow or goat milk and fresh cheeses are part of the diet, although their preservation requires care in the warm climate. Oils, obtained from olives or sesame, are used for cooking and dressing. Seasonings are simple: salt from the delta's salt pans, and aromatic herbs like cilantro, parsley, and mint, grown in small gardens or gathered from the wild. The preparation of food is a family task, using clay ovens or cooking over the fire, sharing the food as a community. Food is not just sustenance, but also a social act and a connection to the land that provides for you. Food offerings to the gods are a common practice, giving thanks for the blessings received. The day comes to an end. You have worked following the rhythm of the sun, adapting to the seasons, and sharing the labors with your community. You might think that the day's tasks are over, but life in ancient Egypt is deeply intertwined with its beliefs and the constant presence of the divine. Religion is not simply an aspect of life, but the framework that gives meaning to your existence. Temples are vital centers of the community, places of worship, learning, and administration. Priests, as intermediaries between men and gods, guide religious practices, perform rituals, and offer counsel. Religious festivals, dedicated to gods like Ra, Osiris, Isis, and many others, mark the calendar and bring the community together in celebrations full of meaning. The belief in the afterlife is fundamental, influencing funeral practices, the construction of tombs, and the veneration of ancestors. Amulets and prayers are part of daily life, seeking the protection of the gods and good fortune. The figure of the pharaoh, as a divine intermediary and guarantor of the cosmic order, Ma'at, is central to your worldview. His well-being is considered crucial for the prosperity of the kingdom. Daily life is imbued with this awareness of the sacred, offering comfort, hope, and a sense of belonging to an ordered and meaningful universe. Daily life is deeply intertwined with religion and ancestral beliefs. Temples are centers of the community, not just places of worship, but also spaces for learning, administration, and celebration. Priests play a fundamental role as intermediaries between humans and the gods, interpreting divine designs, performing rituals, and offering spiritual and moral guidance. The calendar is marked by religious festivities dedicated to the numerous deities of the Egyptian pantheon, each with its sphere of influence and its own rituals. Participating in these festivities is an essential part of social and spiritual life, strengthening community ties and reaffirming the connection with the divine. Each day is structured around religious practices. At dawn, offerings and prayers may be made to the rising sun, Ra acknowledging his role as the source of life and light. Throughout the day, small devotions can be made to the guardian gods of the home and craft. At nightfall, prayers may be offered to the nocturnal deities, seeking protection during rest. Reverence is manifested in everyday gestures, such as mentioning the names of the gods and wearing protective amulets. Beliefs about the afterlife are an integral part of your worldview. Preparation for life after death influences your actions and the way you honor your ancestors. Tombs are not just final resting places, but also dwellings for eternity, and offerings and rituals are performed to ensure the well-being of the deceased in the other world. The figure of the pharaoh is central to this belief system, considered a divine intermediary and the guarantor of the cosmic order, Ma'at. His well-being and his connection with the gods are crucial for the prosperity and stability of the kingdom. Temples receive tithes and offerings from the community, ensuring their maintenance and the sustenance of the priests. These tributes are seen as a way of honoring the gods and ensuring their favor. Religious festivals offer a respite from daily work, but they are also moments of deep devotion and community participation. Questioning fundamental beliefs or challenging the authority of the priests is not common in daily life, as religion provides a framework for understanding the world and your place in it. You follow the traditions and rituals passed down from generation to generation, seeking harmony with the gods and the continuity of the cosmic order. Daily life is imbued with this awareness of the sacred, offering comfort, hope, and a sense of belonging to a universe full of meaning. If life for a simple man in ancient Egypt was marked by work and adaptation to the environment, existence for a woman presented its own peculiarities and defined roles within society. From an early age, a girl's life was oriented towards the family and domestic sphere. She was expected to learn the necessary skills for housekeeping, food preparation, making simple clothes, and caring for children. Formal education, such as reading and writing, was less common for women, although there is evidence of literate women, especially in wealthier families. However, the transmission of practical knowledge and family traditions was a fundamental part of their upbringing. Marriage occurred at a relatively young age, and the choice of a partner was usually a family decision, seeking stability and the continuity of the household. The woman's role as a wife and mother was central, and she was expected to contribute to the family's well-being through her domestic work and childcare. In addition to household chores, women also participated in various economic activities, depending on their social origin and geographical location. In rural areas, they could assist in agricultural labor, especially during planting and harvesting, as well as in raising animals. In urban centers, some women worked as artisans, merchants, or servants. Their contribution to the family economy was important, although often less visible than that of men. Within the religious sphere, women also had a significant role. They participated in rituals and festivities, and some could serve as priestesses in temples dedicated to goddesses. The female figure was revered in many deities, such as Isis, Hathor, and Bastet, each representing different aspects of life: fertility, protection, and joy. While their role in the religious hierarchy might be different from that of men, their participation in the community's spiritual life was active. The health and well-being of women were linked to the challenges of motherhood and the living conditions of the time. Childbirth was a crucial moment, and medical care was limited. However, midwives and traditional knowledge about the care of the mother and newborn existed. Life expectancy, as for men, was influenced by diseases, nutrition, and environmental conditions. In the society of ancient Egypt, while there were differentiated roles between men and women, women had an active presence and made an essential contribution to family, economic, and religious life. Their role was fundamental for the continuity of society and the maintenance of traditions. Until now, you have worked under the sun, adapted to the rhythms of the Nile, and shared life in community. But existence in ancient Egypt also involved challenges and the occasional presence of conflict, though perhaps not with the rawness and omnipresence of violence described in the medieval context. The notion of order and justice, ma'at, was fundamental in Egyptian society, and the pharaoh and his representatives were expected to maintain it. However, as in any society, conflicts and crimes could arise. Law and justice were administered by appointed officials, from local scribes to higher courts. Punishments for crimes varied according to the severity of the offense, seeking to maintain order and social harmony. While punishments could be severe, the concept of justice was linked to restoring balance and repairing damage. Conflicts could arise between individuals over disputes about land, resources, or personal grievances. Disturbances or revolts could also occur in times of social or economic tension. Violence, though not the daily norm, could manifest in these situations. The protection of the community was based on local authority and ultimately on the pharaoh's forces. Family and community life was the foundation of society, and the peaceful resolution of conflicts through mediation and agreement was expected. Social cohesion and respect for norms were important for maintaining stability. War and large-scale conflicts were less frequent in the daily life of a common citizen during the reign of Tutankhamun, although the kingdom could be involved in military campaigns on its borders. The main concern for most of the population was subsistence, work, and community life, under the protection of the pharaoh and the divine order. Let's pause for a moment to remember the figure of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun, a boy king, ascended to the throne of the two lands in a time of change and religious tension. His reign, though brief, marked a return to the ancient traditions, seeking to restore balance and harmony after the monotheistic fervor of Akhenaten. He was not a pharaoh of vast empires, nor of colossal monuments that defied the sky. His legacy endured in a much more intimate and surprising way. The eternal sleep in a tomb forgotten by time, guarding a treasure that centuries later would reveal the magnificence of Egyptian civilization. It was the intact discovery of his final resting place in the Valley of the Kings that immortalized his name, allowing us to glimpse the richness of his funerary goods and the deep spirituality of his culture. Tutankhamun, the young king, whose eternal rest continues to tell us stories of a glorious past. Allow me to share with you another fascinating aspect of Tutankhamun's history. His ascent to the throne, as just a boy, was marked by the influence of powerful counselors who guided him in the early years of his reign. One of the most significant acts was the abandonment of the city of Akhetaten, founded by Akhenaten, and the return of the court to the ancient capital of Thebes, a center of religious and political power for centuries. This move symbolized the rejection of his predecessors' religious reforms and the re-establishment of the cult of Amun as the principal deity of the Egyptian pantheon. His original name, Tutankhaten, which meant living image of Aten, was changed to Tutankhamun, living image of Amun, reflecting this shift in religious orientation. Although his reign was relatively short, his figure represents a crucial point in Egyptian history, marking the transition from a period of religious revolution to the restoration of ancient beliefs a legacy that would resonate through the centuries until the astonishing discovery of his tomb. And now, imagine for a moment the perspective of a simple citizen of ancient Egypt, a man or a woman whose day passed between the labors of the field or the bustle of the workshops, observing the figure of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun. To them, the king was much more than an earthly ruler. He was the incarnation of divinity, the son of Ra on earth, the guarantor of cosmic order and the prosperity of the kingdom. His youth did not diminish his sacred aura, but perhaps cloaked him in a halo of promise and renewal. To see him pass in ceremonial processions, surrounded by pomp and power, was to witness the direct connection with the gods, the assurance that the Nile would continue to flood the lands, that the harvests would be abundant, and that the balance of Ma'at would be maintained. Tutankhamun was the visible hope of a stable and blessed Egypt, a distant yet essential figure for the well-being of every humble inhabitant on the banks of the Nile. Let's delve even deeper into the perception that a common citizen might have had of Tutankhamun. Beyond his divine role and guarantor of prosperity, the pharaoh was also a human figure, albeit invested with almost incomprehensible power. For the peasant who worked the land hard under the relentless sun, or for the artisan who dedicated his hands to creating objects, the pharaoh's existence represented the pinnacle of an unmovable social hierarchy, a cosmic order reflected on earth. The news of ceremonies in Thebes, of offerings in the temples, or of royal projects, though distant from their daily reality, reinforced the idea of a world ordered and protected by the figure of the king. The health and well-being of the pharaoh were of collective interest, as it was believed that his connection with the gods directly influenced the fertility of the land and the abundance of the harvests, essential elements for everyone's survival. In this sense, Tutankhamun, though distant in his power and glory, was a central figure in the worldview of the ancient Egyptian, a vital link between the earthly world and the divine realm. At this point in your immersion into ancient Egypt, you have shared the labor under the sun, you have adapted to the rhythms of the Nile, and you have lived in community under the gaze of your gods. But earthly existence, in any era, has its end. And in ancient Egypt, although life was imbued with hope in the continuity after death, early mortality was also a reality. If on this dream journey you encounter an old man or woman whose face bears the marks of many seasons, you are contemplating someone who has overcome the challenges of their time. Life expectancy was influenced by factors such as nutrition, diseases, and working conditions, with child mortality being a significant factor. Diseases, although not fully understood, were a constant threat. Infections, malnutrition, and waterborne diseases could snuff out young lives. Without the advances of modern medicine, survival depended on the body's strength, traditional knowledge of herbs, and the will of the gods. If childhood was surpassed, adult life began early, marked by work in the fields, craftsmanship, or service. The body felt the strain of daily tasks, and ailments could appear over time. For women, motherhood was a central aspect of life, but it also carried risks. Childbirth, although attended by experienced midwives, could present complications. The health of the mother and newborn was a constant concern. For men, the dangers could be linked to work accidents, injuries, or illnesses. Death could come in various ways, from disease, accidents, or old age. Funeral rituals were an important part of Egyptian culture, reflecting the belief in life after death and the importance of ensuring the deceased's passage to the beyond. Bodies were prepared and buried with offerings and belongings, according to the family's means, seeking to ensure their well-being in the next life. The construction of tombs and the practice of mummification, though more elaborate for the upper classes, reflected a deep concern for the fate after death. Life in ancient Egypt, though marked by work and adaptation, was also imbued with a deep connection to the divine and hope in the continuity of existence. The cycle of life and death was understood within a framework of beliefs that offered comfort and meaning. And speaking of the end of the journey, let your dream consciousness gradually fade, reaching the end of this immersion in ancient Egypt. The day comes to a close. Reflect for a moment on how your imaginary day has passed. You woke with the sunlight, worked the land or your craft, shared a meal with your family, honored your gods, and lived under the protection of the pharaoh. Welcome to a single, condensed day in ancient Egypt. Do you still imagine a world of towering pyramids and dazzling treasures? That image, though part of its history, was not the daily experience of most. Life for the common citizen was marked by work, community, and a deep connection with the land and their beliefs. The social hierarchy was a reality, with the pharaoh at the top, followed by nobles, priests, scribes, artisans, and peasants. The destiny of each individual was largely tied to their birth. However, within this structure, there was the possibility of social mobility through service to the pharaoh, success in the army, or the development of specialized skills. Life, though demanding, was imbued with a sense of order and purpose, with each individual contributing to the functioning of society. Challenges existed, the Nile floods required adaptation, diseases could affect communities, and work was often arduous. However, life was also marked by cooperation, the celebration of religious festivals, and hope in the continuity after death. The connection with nature, the agricultural cycles, and the constant presence of the divine offered a framework of understanding and meaning. But here lies a powerful truth. Despite the demands of life, people found joy in family, in community celebrations, in music, dance, and in the telling of stories. The resilience and the ability to find meaning in everyday life were inherent characteristics of human nature, in ancient Egypt as well. So tonight, as you drift into your rest, perhaps offer a moment of reflection for those who lived on the banks of the Nile thousands of years ago, working the land and building a civilization that still amazes us today. In the marble halls of Athens and the crowded streets of Rome, fashion became philosophy and a uniform of identity. The ancient Greeks favored balance in all things, in architecture, in thought, and in the folds of their garments. Men wore chitons, rectangular linen garments fastened at the shoulder and cinched at the waist. Women draped themselves in peplos or himation, elegantly folded layers of fabric that transformed the body into a living sculpture. Sandals were simple, hair was styled with moderation, and jewelry, though present, always served harmony. For the Greeks, beauty was moral, simplicity meant virtue, ornamentation was fine as long as it wasn't ostentatious. But then came Rome, and Rome never whispered. Roman fashion was spectacle, power, class. Where the Greeks draped, the Romans layered and legislated. The toga, made from a single piece of wool, up to 6 meters long, became the ultimate symbol of Roman status. Not everyone could wear one, only male Roman citizens. And even then, there were rules. There was the toga virilis for adult men, the toga praetexta, with a purple stripe for senators and magistrates, and the toga picta, embroidered with gold and reserved for emperors and victorious generals. Each type was a costume of authority. Underneath the togas, everyone wore tunics, the t-shirt of the ancient world, simple, knee-length for men, ankle-length for women. But even tunics told stories. A wealthy Roman might wear a tunic woven from Egyptian linen, or dyed with the rare Tyrian purple, a colour so expensive it was worth more than gold. Women's fashion in Rome was equally coded. The stola marked the married woman. The palla, a cloak-like shawl, offered modesty and movement. Hair was curled, braided, piled high, and sometimes adorned with gold or ivory pins. Fashion wasn't just beauty. It was a message of fertility, virtue, and social belonging. Even slaves had a role in fashion, defined by what they could not wear. In both Greece and Rome, clothes didn't just protect the body. They showed your rank, your role, your citizenship. Every fold, every weave, every colour was a statement. You didn't just wear a toga, you wore the state. While Rome wrapped itself in wool and Greece in linen, Asia was spinning something far more luxurious: silk. The Silk Road was more than a trade route. It was a fashion superhighway that stretched from China to the Mediterranean. It carried not just goods, but ideas, textiles, and styles that would shape centuries of dress. At the heart of it all was China, where silk wasn't just an export. It was a symbol of imperial control. For centuries, the knowledge of silk production was guarded as a state secret. Only royalty and high-ranking officials could wear the finest silks, dyed in colours reserved for emperors, like the brilliant and almost mythical imperial yellow. Chinese robes, especially under the Tang and Han dynasties, were masterpieces of structure and symbolism. Embroidered dragons, phoenixes, and clouds weren't just decoration, they were spiritual markers of rank and destiny. A person's robe said more than any scroll. Further west, in India, fashion took a different course. Bold, colourful, and sensually draped. The sari, still worn today, dates back thousands of years, woven from fine cotton and silk, dyed with indigo and turmeric. Saris weren't just beautiful, they were regional fingerprints. A woman's drape, weave, and border could reveal her origin, her caste, her status. Meanwhile, in Japan, elegance met armor during the Heian period. Nobles wore layered silk robes called junihito, whose sleeves and collars revealed carefully coordinated colors, a kind of poetic fashion code. But as the samurai class rose, fashion shifted toward function and symbolism. Enter the kimono, worn by warriors and commoners alike. The kimono became a garment of layered meaning, its fabric, weave, and design communicating season, occasion, and even political allegiance. The samurai's kimono was sometimes worn under armor, its crest boldly announcing clan loyalty. For geishas and courtesans, the kimono's sleeves became canvases for art. Asian fashion balanced tradition with refinement, restraint with richness. Every fold, pattern, and stitch was deliberate. And as fabrics flowed along the Silk Road, Asia quietly taught the world something vital, that clothes weren't just protection or pride, they were culture sewn to the skin. In medieval and Renaissance Europe, clothes weren't just what you wore, they were who you were. From castle halls to candlelit courts, fashion became a chessboard where every thread was a move, and every outfit a statement of power, virtue, or rebellion. During the Middle Ages, clothing was rigidly tied to class. The poor wore coarse wool and undyed linen. The wealthy became walking tapestries, fur-lined cloaks, jewel-studded belts, and elaborate braids signaled wealth and piety in equal measure. Dyes were everything. A deep blue meant wealth, a true scarlet reserved for royalty and cardinals. And then came the sumptuary laws, literal legal codes dictating what you could and could not wear based on your social rank. If you dared to wear silks without noble blood, that wasn't a fashion crime. It was a real crime. In Renaissance Italy, fashion became an art form, Florence and Venice leading the way, creating garments so opulent they seemed to defy gravity. Men wore puffed sleeves and slashed doublets. Women sported velvet gowns with stiff bodices and embroidered sleeves that whispered tales of family lineage and political power. It was no accident that during this time of intellectual rebirth, fashion became intensely theatrical. The more fabric you wore, the less you were expected to work. It was a silent performance of status. Look how much I can afford to waste. Then came the corset. Originally worn for posture and modesty, it evolved into a tool of silhouette control, cinching waists, lifting busts, and eventually becoming a symbol of both feminine elegance and restriction. The ideal female body became an architectural achievement. And in the great courts of France and England, fashion reached new dizzying heights, literally, with towering wigs, ruffled collars, and gowns that required scaffolding underneath. Women moved like chandeliers and men were just as dramatic, with stockings, jewels, codpieces, and shoes that curled like punctuation marks. Fashion was power. A courtier's dress could win favors or ruin reputations. To be seen was everything. To be seen incorrectly was dangerous in a world of crowns and conspiracies. Clothes were armor, not just against the cold, but against irrelevance. By the 17th century, European fashion had become a spectacle of excess. In the French court of Louis XIV, fashion wasn't just a pastime, it was politics. Versailles was a stage and everyone wore a costume. Men strutted in brocade coats with gold embroidery, lace cuffs, silk stockings, and red-heeled shoes, a signature of the king himself. Their hair was powdered, perfumed, and piled high in towering wigs, often adorned with curls, ribbons, and even miniature ships. Women's gowns were architectural marvels, with wide panniers that extended the skirts several feet on either side. Dresses were layered, ruffled, and embroidered to the point of collapse. Skin was powdered white, cheeks were rouged red, and beauty marks were placed like exclamation points. It was beautiful, ridiculous, and deeply political. In a world where wealth meant control, fashion became a language of elite detachment. For the nobility, clothes were a way to rise above the ordinary. For everyone else, it was a reminder of how far they had fallen. And then came the French Revolution in 1789. The people stormed the Bastille, not just the palace, but everything it stood for. Excess, inequality, silk and satin at the expense of bread. The guillotine didn't just fall on kings. It fell on wigs, heels, corsets. High-class fashion became the uniform of the enemy. Suddenly, simplicity was power. The sans-culottes, or without breeches, proudly rejected aristocratic knee breeches. Instead, they wore simple trousers, the clothes of the working class. Wearing extravagant clothing during this time was not just tone-deaf, it was dangerous. In the wake of the revolution, Fashion itself was democratized. The classical world was idealized. Clean lines, natural fabrics, Grecian-inspired dresses, wigs and heavy makeup disappeared almost overnight. Even Napoleon understood clothing as strategy. His military uniform, designed for drama and authority, helped create the image of the strong, modern leader. His wife Josephine popularized the high-waisted empire dresses and sheer fabrics that redefined elegance for a new era. But the powdered wig had become a relic. Fashion had shifted from flaunting wealth to redefining identity. The revolution didn't just change who ruled France, it changed what people wore to survive. The 19th century roared to life with the hiss of steam engines and the hum of power looms. The Industrial Revolution didn't just change how people worked, it changed how they dressed. Suddenly, clothes weren't reserved for aristocrats and royalty. Machines could spin, dye, and sew fabric faster than human hands ever could. Mass production meant lower prices, wider availability, and for the first time in history, fashion began to trickle down. But even as manufacturing modernized, style remained rooted in spectacle. Women's fashion took on volume, dramatic, sweeping, and almost absurd. The invention of the crinoline, a cage-like steel structure worn under skirts, allowed women to wear dresses that billowed out like open umbrellas. Some reached 6 feet in diameter, forcing women to move sideways through doors and practically orbit each other in ballrooms. The message was clear. If you could wear a dress that prevented you from working, walking, or even sitting comfortably, you were probably rich enough not to care. Meanwhile, corsets got even tighter, molding waists into wasp-like proportions. The ideal woman became a fragile hourglass floating in a sea of silk, lace, and tulle. Fashion was both a prison and a pedestal. For men, fashion settled into sharp, sober lines. Frock coats, waistcoats, top hats, the uniform of the respectable gentleman. It was during this era that the modern suit began to take shape. Clean, understated, professional, dignified without being flashy. But beneath the surface, new trends were stirring. Department stores emerged in cities, offering ready-made clothing to a growing middle class. Fashion magazines like Godey's Lady's Book and La Belle Assemblée began to shape tastes. And with the advent of photography, people could now see what fashion looked like far beyond their village. The rise of the sewing machine. In the 1,850 seconds, it brought another shift, not just in production, but in personal creativity. Home sewing patterns became popular, style became accessible. Fashion was no longer just for the elite. It was becoming a tool of expression. Even Queen Victoria had an impact, popularizing white wedding dresses, mourning black, and modesty as fashion in this new industrial world. Clothes no longer just reflected identity, now they were building it, one stitch at a time. As the 20th century dawned, fashion stood at a crossroads, torn between the corseted elegance of the past and the liberation roaring with the future. Then came World War I, and everything changed. With men at battle, women entered factories, fields, and offices. The corset, once a daily ritual, became impractical, even dangerous. Skirts got shorter, fabrics got lighter, practicality became patriotic. Women in uniforms, trousers, and simple, tailored coats began to rewrite the definition of femininity. After the war, they weren't ready to go back. The 1,920 seconds ushered in a new archetype. The flapper wore drop-waist dresses, cut her hair into a bob, painted her lips red, and danced in speakeasies with a cigarette holder in one hand and rebellion in the other. Her dresses shimmered with fringe and beads. Her knees scandalized society, and her confidence challenged generations of restriction. This was fashion as freedom, as refusal. Meanwhile, the men of the Jazz Age embraced sleek suits, wide-leg trousers, slicked-back hair, and Oxford shoes. Hollywood helped glamorize this image on screen and off. Stars like Greta Garbo and Clark Gable set trends that audiences around the world followed. Then came the crash. The Great Depression of the 1,930 seconds forced fashion back toward conservatism. Hemlines dropped, colors muted, people mended instead of buying. Style didn't disappear, it adapted. Old garments were reworked, flour sacks became dresses, and movie stars introduced surrealist elements, mocking the austerity imposed by global conflict. Fashion transformed into more than just style. It became resistance, a signal to the world that even in chaos, we still choose who we are and what we wear to survive. The world emerged from World War II battered, but hungry for beauty, And in 1947, French designer Christian Dior offered it. He called it the new look. Cinched waists, full, flowing skirts, soft shoulders, and delicate fabrics. It was a dramatic return to opulence, a celebration of femininity, luxury, and control. For many women, it felt like breathing again, after years of rationing and uniforms. But not everyone applauded. To some, the new look was a step backward, a return to restrictive ideals after decades of progress. The tension between tradition and transformation would define fashion for the decades to come. In the 1,950 seconds, suburban America embraced a polished style, pearls and pencil skirts, grey flannel suits, and everything pressed to perfection. But under that glossy surface, rebellion was brewing. Teenagers, a newly defined demographic, began to reject the style of their parents. They idolized screen rebels like James Dean and Marlon Brando, whose plain white t-shirts, leather jackets, and blue jeans felt raw, honest, and dangerous. And there it was. Denim, once a symbol of the American working class, became the uniform of youth rebellion. It wasn't fashion made for you. It was fashion you claimed. Then came the 60 seconds, and the revolution wasn't just televised, it was worn. London's mod culture gave birth to slim-fit suits, miniskirts, and bold prints. Hippies embraced embroidery, bell-bottoms, and thrifted style. Fashion became political. Anti-war, anti-establishment, anti-everything that came before. By the 1,970 seconds, the lines had blurred. High fashion still thrived, but street style had found its voice. Music drove fashion, from disco sequins to the torn t-shirts and safety pins of punk. And through it all, denim endured, dressed up, dressed down, or torn in protest. Designers like Yves Saint Laurent and Vivienne Westwood understood the turning tide. Fashion was no longer dictated from the top down. It was now a two-way mirror, reflecting and shaping the world at once. Clothes were no longer just about class or gender. They were about attitude, identity, and resistance. From the silks of Dior to the denim of Levis, fashion had become something entirely new. Not just what you wore, but who you were. As the 20th century closed, fashion shed its last skin. It stopped asking what we should wear and started asking who we are. The 21st century kicked off with a new energy, fueled by identity, diversity, and the rise of the digital age. Fashion was no longer governed by seasonal trends whispered in the salons of Paris and Milan. It now pulsed through Instagram, TikTok, and the street corners of Seoul, Nairobi, and New York. Trends were global and instantaneous. A teenager with a smartphone could spark a movement faster than a runway show. The rise of fast fashion made style more accessible than ever. Brands like Zara, H&M, and Forever 21 churned out runway-inspired clothes at lightning speed. But it came at a cost. Environmental damage, exploited labor, and a growing awareness of fashion's dark side. In response, sustainability became a new standard. Designers began to rethink materials, waste, and responsibility. Thrift stores boomed, upcycling became chic, and capsule wardrobes and the motto, "Buy less, choose well," became mantras. But the real revolution was representation. For decades, fashion favored one body type, one skin tone, one ideal. But now the industry is changing. Designers are casting models of all races, sizes, genders, and abilities. Runways feature hijabs, wheelchairs, vitiligo, and drag. What once existed on the margins now walks center stage. Fashion became a battleground for cultural conversations. Fashion now lives everywhere and belongs to everyone. What began as linen in ancient Egypt has become a global language, one that can whisper tradition, scream rebellion, or simply say, "This is me." Because in the end, fashion isn't just what we wear, it's how we show the world who we are. I hope you enjoyed this journey with me as much as I have enjoyed it. I hope you have sweet dreams. From here, your friend from Dreams with History greets you. Rest well.